This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 151.
They're getting that knowledge not on their own, but they're finding it kind of on their own, and it's so much more meaningful, it's deeper. I find sometimes when I teach in that method, there's a level of trust that has to be there between the students and self, like where
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Kennerman, the host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here, unfortunately, without my co-host, Mr. Matt the Ranger Rick Rogers. Tonight we had on a fantastic teacher, the 2023 Wisconsin Teacher of the Year, Lori Danz. And as we will learn very quickly, she is immersed in what could be national parks. It's not actually national parks, but immersed in outdoor education and the forest that her district has. And it was a concept that I had not really heard of before, but we learned about how it's involved in a lot of Wisconsin school districts and the way she is leveraging this learning tool for her students and for every student from kindergarten through 12th grade in her district. This conversation was really, really fantastic. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about her instructional approach with that, how she is supporting teachers and creating experiences for students. We talk a lot about strategies for transitioning in our classroom into one that is not solely based on the content that we're providing, but the experiences that we're opening our students' eyes to and giving them and immersing themselves in the standards and the content. So we talk a lot about how to do it. We talk a lot about what that instruction looks like. And we also talk about how we know when it is not going well. And I think that conversation was extremely beneficial. And so I really encourage you to tune in and listen to Lori and what she has to offer. And right before we jump into that conversation, let's just hear from our Teach Better Network. Hi, Lori. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, Ken. Thank you. And thank you for having me tonight.
Absolutely. I'm really excited.
I'm excited to talk teaching and education.
Me too. So just kick it off for us, nice and simple. Officially introduce yourself to our audience. Let them know where you are coming from and give us a snapshot of your career in education.
Okay, well, I am coming to you tonight from Wisconsin. I'm the 2023 Wisconsin State Teacher of the Year. A little bit about me is I've been teaching for many years. I believe I'm on my 31st or 32nd year now. I teach high school biology, but I'm also our school forest coordinator, and I'm our outdoor education coordinator. So I teach at our school forest, which is a pretty unique experience.
That sounds incredible. So is that common in Wisconsin to have this type of outdoor education as an offering for high school students, or is it more personalized because of specifically where you live?
Well, here's what I learned, Ken. I thought every state had school forests, but I do think it is something kind of unique to Wisconsin, or that's where the program was started. So in our state, we do have these school forest properties. And the idea, as I understand it, was when in the late 1800s, when we kind of logged the forests out of our state and we clear cut a lot of our land, school districts were offered either free of charge or at very low cost these tracts of land, and some are very, very small. Some like in Superior, where I teach, are very large areas of land where we take our students out to the woods, or sometimes it isn't really a forested land. It's just a natural area, and we use the outdoors as a context for teaching. So I do think it's somewhat unique to Wisconsin, this idea of school forests.
It sounds like it.
But it is, I'm sorry, you asked one other question. It is all grade levels. So today, for example, I have third graders out there, but we have students out who are pre-K all the way through 12th grade. Sometimes I have college level students out there. We use it for professional development with our teachers. So it's for everybody, really.
Okay, now I'm even more interested. So you're working with kids pre-K through 12, and you also teach high school biology. So I do want to wrap back around to the high school biology. So give us a deeper understanding of this program. So is it all students that get to experience this at some point throughout the year or multiple times throughout the year, or is it specific students in each grade level or a cohort that they're following? Like what is the dynamic? If giving us a snapshot of what your district looks like in terms of number of schools, number of students will be helpful at all. Please include that information too.
Okay. What I can tell you is different school districts in our state use their school force in different ways. So I'll speak to what we do in Superior. For us, what it is this. I'm our school force coordinator, and what that means is if there is a teacher who would like to bring their students to our school force, they contact me. And then we talk about what they're learning in the classroom and how we can develop an outdoor lesson to kind of build off of what they're doing in their classroom with their standards, or to set the stage for an upcoming standard that they will teach. So we'll sit down and plan that lesson together. And then when they come out, we just try to provide an experience for them that's kind of a foundational experience that when they get back to the classroom, they can look back on and reflect on, or use it maybe as something to finalize a unit that they did or a standard. So for me, I have different teachers who will come out every year. Every year I have new teachers who might hear about our program and come out, but this fall and right now I have teachers out approximately 4 to 5 days a week. In the winter, it will slow down a little bit. It might be like 2 to 3 days a week when the weather gets colder up here. But it's a way for us to teach really every content. I'll have music groups come out. I'll have some high school groups come out and have kind of retreat days where they immerse themselves in their content, but we do it in a natural setting. So it's there to use for how, in whatever way teachers see best fit to meet the needs of their students. Does that help a little bit, or
That's
a little bit?
No, that helps a lot. That makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like a really amazing experience that is available to teachers. Yeah, I'm thinking about, as you were saying it, I'm thinking about my role. So I'm an instructional coach in my district now, and I work primarily with our middle schools and high school. I taught fifth grade for a long time before moving into that position. As a fifth grade teacher, I would try to use the outdoors as much as possible. And I will admit that at first it was literally just to be outside, right? And there's value in that. There's value in, being exposed to sunlight and the fresh air and just the change of scenery. Like there is value in that for students. And I would continue to use that. But through listening to other teachers, I was at a conference once where someone presented on outdoor education and opening my ideas to not just getting outside, but leveraging what is outside and available to be able to create different experiences for students. And so like when I taught Earth's biomes. And so for some of those things or learning about adaptations, I would create scenarios and simulations outside. And it was good, but if I had a forest available to me, I feel like it would have been even better. And part of the work they did in that unit was they created videos as if they were in the biome to represent and display the information that they had researched and learned. And a lot of it was fictitious and fake. And, sometimes we had green screens available, but it was very, very, it was a lot comedy driven because they were just acting like a desk was a tree and different things like that. And that was okay because it was to display their knowledge of what they had learned. But thinking about, again, having a forest available, how much more they would have been able to do with that is really exciting to think about, your teachers having that available to them. Some districts have like an interactive TV screen in the library available to them, not a forest, right? So can you pick a grade level or a lesson that you've done recently, or one of those ones that you circle back to every year with a teacher, just to give us an idea of what is the standard that they are looking to involve the forest with, and how is that experience transformed for the students, to give us a little bit of a better picture of that.
Sure. Boy, you know what, Ken? It's so hard to pick just one because every day.
You can pick multiple. Because
Okay.
I think this is really exciting to hear about and listen. I think there's a lot to learn from it.
Sure. It looks different every day out there because we have different age levels of students, different subject areas that teachers want to integrate. But one lesson that just I go back to, and because I think it was such a meaningful day, it just sticks in my mind where it really encompassed uh, what that forest can be used for. It was probably 2 years ago, and our middle school choir teacher contacted me and asked if she could bring her middle school to the forest for the day. She had an upcoming concert, and her theme for the concert was breaking trail. So she wanted to integrate in Superior. Not in Superior, in Wisconsin, we have this trail called the Ice Age Hiking Trail, and it goes across the whole state. And it follows where the last advance of the most recent glacier advanced across our state. So it's just really neat topography and everything like that. Well, we had several years ago, an African American lady by the name of Emily Ford hiked this trail solo in the winter by herself. So it was kind of big news around here. And this choir teacher kind of wanted to integrate the story of Emily into her music and concert with her students. So she asked if she could come to the forest to rehearse for the day in nature, to kind of immerse her students in nature as they practiced. And she asked if I could maybe talk a little bit about the geology of our state and why that trail is there and things like this. So I just remember that day because we did this really cool geology lesson. We hiked the students down to this bog area. It was a day just filled with mosquitoes, so it wasn't a comfortable day for the students. So they kind of got a sense for like what Emily had to go through as she persevered, physically to navigate this trail. While we did this, the students were singing, and I just remember them singing and being out in nature, learning geology, hearing about this wonderful woman who hiked this trail solo, and then just their happiness and these voices in the forest singing. So it was just this integration of many subjects, many topics. And as you just kind of hinted at before, there's this whole just healthy feeling of learning out in nature. We see so many kids right now who have anxiety, who are depressed, who really are dealing with some severe mental health issues. And there's something that happens with these classes and these students, and what happens between the students and the teachers when they're learning in this environment, that's really hard to put a finger on in terms of like why the magic happens, but it does. And that day just stands out in my mind in terms of what that environment can offer for learning and teaching and community building between the teachers and the students. So yeah, it was kind of a magical day. What's interesting to me,
Yeah, I love that example.
what's
Please go ahead.
sure,
Go ahead.
something I've been thinking about this year a lot, is I teach biology in a traditional classroom. So I start my days at our high school with 10th 10th grade students, and I think I'm the teacher in that classroom that I am outdoors in the environment at our forest. But the results that happen in the forest are different. And mainly it has to do, I think, with the community building that happens with the students and how they're more authentic. Um, so I'm trying to figure that out, like why there is that difference if I'm not the variable. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and I think it has to do with really giving them an experience as they learn content.
That's interesting. I love your example because it wasn't a science example. I think for me and for a lot of our listeners, they're going to think, oh, if I teach elementary school and science is one of my subjects, or if I'm a middle school or high school science teacher, yeah, I can see why I would go out into the forest. So I love that you gave a music example, because that is the exact opposite, I think, of where assumptions would lie with what you can do in an outdoor classroom. I'm thinking so many math concepts like symmetry or ratios. Like there's just different creative ways where you could go out and experience that to enhance the curriculum, as well as all of those other benefits that you're showcasing right here, the team building and the fresh air and the difference in the way the students interact with each other, and the teachers interact with the students. And I have found over my career, when I try something that's different, like I said, go outside for sunlight, right? When I try things that are different, it starts to get me to think different. And then looking at, okay, going outside seems to be beneficial for my students. Now, how can I look at what I teach and get them outside more, right? And now I start to become more creative. Now I start to think about ways to approach the content differently. And then I felt like the next step was, wow, when you do this, you actually enhance the curriculum. It's not let me get through the curriculum to find time for that extra lesson. Like that experience in the forest is the lesson, right? That is where the students are learning the content that they're targeting. And I think the more teachers experience that, the more they can open themselves up to those ideas. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, how has your position in working with the forest impacted your position as a biology teacher in a cinder block wall classroom? And so you showcased that a little bit. You touched on that a little bit, but have you taken specific instructional strategies that you've observed or helped teachers with in that program that have walked backwards into your biology classroom?
Definitely. I think about that all of the time. It's like, what can I transfer from what I've learned in working with students outdoors in that environment to bring it into the classroom? I think it's little things. I think it's, giving students that time to move around, the time to have dialogue and share and interact with each other. I think sometimes when we're in our classrooms, we forget to do that. We see ourselves at that front of that classroom and giving information or sharing. So I just try to make it in my classroom more of a community where the students have that interaction and problem solve, and where I'm not just giving them information where they have to more figure that information out. And in science, that's such that's how we try to teach anyway. One benefit in my position is I have this incredible opportunity almost every day to watch these teachers in my district who are so gifted. I was trained in secondary education in middle school and high school. And I have learned so much from elementary teachers and watching their gifts and how they work with students. They have taught me so much. So a lot of what I've learned is not only about, like using the outdoors in terms of the context for teaching, but just learning from my colleagues. They really, truly are the people who deserve the credit for making our program what it is. You know, I might be there coordinating and teaching lessons, but they are also involved out there every given day, teaching and sharing. So, you know, it's such a two-way street. I think I don't feel like I answered your question well. I know that throughout this year, I've just reflected a lot on the idea of how can we take what happens outdoors in that setting with students and transfer it and make it work in our traditional brick classrooms, you know. And I don't have the answers yet, but I think that there are certain things that do happen, and it's that communication, it's the um, equity that the outdoors offers. You know, everybody's on an even playing ground out there. A lot of times, the roles that students kind of take on in the traditional classroom, they lose them when they're outdoors for whatever reasons. Um, and I wish that was true every day in our traditional classrooms. So I don't have.
You answered it. You answered it great.
Okay.
I want to dig into the elementary comment a little bit, because I think there's so much value when we can get our K to 12 teachers communicating with each other. And so our district, we have one day where we do we've really built it into almost like a conference, and every teacher in our district is there, including support staff. And I do think there's so much value that secondary teachers can learn from elementary teachers and vice versa, right? I think if you want to pick math specifically, I think elementary teachers can really benefit from speaking with and watching and observing secondary teachers teach math, because they are more of a math expert and they have a deeper understanding of number sense and the idea of why things happen, and recognizing patterns to build that into elementary instruction. The elementary teachers, jack of all trades, right? They teach all subjects. There's so much different things. Transitions, I think, are incredibly strong in elementary classrooms. So what is even just one thing specific that sticks out to you that you pulled from an elementary teacher that you use in your classroom, and just speak to kind of the effect that it's had?
I think one of the biggest takeaways, one of the greatest gifts I've learned from elementary teachers is building the relationships in classrooms. They are so good at just building that feeling of community in their classrooms between their students and between themselves and their students. It's a team effort. It just is always a team effort, and there's always that message of we're here to help each other, we're here to learn from each other. There's that sharing of responsibilities. You know, a lot of times in elementary classrooms, the different students have different roles to help in the classroom. And I think, you know, sometimes we think that's young or that's elementary, but it isn't. It is something that I think too often, as we get into middle school and high school, um, we forget to do with our students. You know, they are in our classroom. We see them as mature enough to handle lectures or whatever. And we have to have fun with them. We have to laugh. We have to let them interact. I think it's okay to play games in our classroom with them at times. And just that sense of ownership and giving them jobs and responsibilities in the learning too. So to me, that's just a big takeaway that I've gained from the elementary teachers. And then some of the things that you said, you know, like the transitions from one thing to another, uh, the structure of how they um, have a routine sometimes with their kids and get them involved with that. But really, that community building that they do within their classroom is so important, I think, that feeling of belonging.
Yeah, I love that answer, and it has profound effects on what you can accomplish in the classroom. I was recently working with one of our new teachers, and he was feeling a little bit, he was lacking confidence in some different types of instructional strategies. And the first thing I said to him after seeing him teach for a couple classes is I said, the kids love you. Like, they love being here. You have a really positive way of interacting with them. You're very enthusiastic. The kids appreciated being in his classroom. And so I said, everything we do from here is going to be easy, right? It's just tweaking the way you approach a lesson. It's just tweaking the way you started, or the way you engage them, or how you open the activity to them. But they want to be here. They respect you. They like you. Everything from there just becomes so much easier. And I feel like it's so easy to gloss over that. But when you don't, everything becomes an easier process with working with your students. So you talked about um, trying to bring experiences into your biology classroom and giving them challenges versus just giving them the information. So can you dive into that a little bit more in how you have potentially released some control, or lectured less, or kind of what you meant by that, and what it looks like in your classroom?
Well, um, yes, I will try to explain this as well as I can. Um, I think what I have gotten better at is um, learning with my students. Like, I also teach some science methods courses at our local university. And, it's like we were always taught in our teacher eds and methods courses that you shouldn't ever try a lesson with your students that you haven't practiced yourself first. And I do believe that, but I also believe that we don't have to have all the answers. And I think especially teaching science, it's good modeling to the students to say, I don't have all of the answers. An example I'll give you is, like, right now in our biology class, I'm working with the students are collecting some data. Um, we're doing this inquiry project that, without getting too sciencey here, we're looking to see if there's any relationship between the physical structures of different digestive systems and the foods that the animals eat, like herbivores, carnivores, and such. So students are collecting data on this, and we're putting it into the spreadsheet. Well, I am not a spreadsheet kind of person. I've just never been very good at that, but we're working through it together. I'm learning, they're learning, we're finding the patterns. And I think uh, what I just try to tell myself when I structure in lesson plan is, what can I have the students do to learn the content versus me not telling them? So how can they learn this with me saying the least amount that I can in terms of sharing that content? Does that make sense? So it's like, what experience can I create to get them to find the answers on their own? And even if I don't know where that lesson is going to go, um, we'll travel that, we'll navigate that together to get at that learning. So I think a lot of that has come to me from working in the forest, because it's the forest. You never know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to pop up. You don't know if things are going to go exactly as you plan, and it's scary as a teacher. And I think this is what many teachers are uncomfortable with in that informal setting of learning, is you have to have confidence that you and the students will navigate that learning together. And I think they almost appreciate and respect that more, watching you learn with them, and the fact that you don't always know all of the answers. So I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love so many things that you're sharing there, and I honestly, I would say I probably disagree with the advice that they would give us in college in our preparatory classes. I don't think you should practice before doing a lesson, because to me, what you're doing is you are you are preconditioning yourself to prep a lesson where you're going to do most of the work. If you're rehearsing a lesson, that means you are doing a lot, right? The audience doesn't come and rehearse for a play, right? We should be the audience in a classroom. The students are the one on stage. And if we are rehearsing lessons, it means we're rehearsing what we're saying and what we're doing and what we're presenting to the students, instead of spending that time and kind of what you talked about, thinking about what can I create for the students to experience this content? What can I create for the students to explore this content? That time that you would typically spend rehearsing, you're now spending and reflecting and challenging yourself to put them in the driver's seat right out of the gate. And I think there's so much value in that in any class that you teach, any subject that you teach. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had one of your fellow 2023 Teacher of the Years on, Dr. Michael Ida, who is
He is phenomenal.
AP Calc teacher
Yeah.
in Hawaii. He's fantastic, incredibly knowledgeable, and he also teaches computer science. And he now uses this style of exploratory learning where he doesn't really lecture much at all with his AP Calc students. And AP Calc is one of the most stressful stressful courses to teach, because all these kids want to take the AP test, or most of them do. They want to pass this test. They want to earn the college credit. Those AP tests are usually in May, so it's a very strict timeline. And he has found a way to not sacrifice his pacing and allow his students to work more independently, more collaboratively, exploring the content. And if you can do it in a class like that, it just further showcases that you can do it. It takes experience. It takes time. It takes knowledge of your content, right? To circle back to that new teacher, these are some of the things that we're working towards. But I said, your biggest challenge right now is you've never taught this before. So it's hard for you to know what the students can figure out on their own before you've kind of worked and immersed yourself with the students in this content. But when you do that, you allow them to form their own conclusions. You allow them to ask their own questions. And I think it is great modeling, like you said. It's great for the students to see you don't know all the answers. You are learning with them, right? If you're creating this spreadsheet and like you said, you're not a big spreadsheet person, and someone says, well, how do we find the average of all this data? Or how do I compare this column to that column? I don't know. Let's type it into Google and see if there's a formula that we can find together, right? Let's explore the options. Jump on YouTube, watch somebody's tutorial on how to, like, that is great modeling for them to see how you are in the moment learning, adding new skills to your skill set. And so you'll be able to do that in the future with spreadsheets. And so I just think there's so much value in that. How easy is it for you to have your students to adjust to this style of instruction in the beginning of the year? Is it something that you slowly build them towards, or you kind of let them jump in, and is there resistance from them because they're not used to it? Like, what does that dynamic look like with getting the students interested in this style of learning?
I think it's different for every class. I'm teaching 2 sections of biology right now, and just like my own kids at home, I have a son and daughter. We raise them the same, but they are very different personality-wise. Their learning styles are different, and I find that in my 2 classes this year also. But I try to, at the beginning of the year, just dig right in, and I let them know the learning and teaching may look a little different, but I try to approach it as, we're here to have a dialogue every day. We're going to learn from each other. And typically, like this year, it's been successful. I have some students who just, in one class in particular, they are having a little trouble making that shift where the learning is still, their focus is still them learning or trying to do what they think I want them to, versus them learning to find out what they can learn, more of that learning for themselves versus learning for the teacher. The other class, it's going very well. Last year was so successful. It did not take long at all for the students to really embrace, I would say, that style of learning. I sometimes find it's most difficult for the students who are really the high academic achievers, because they're the students very often who want to know, are they getting the right answers? Is this the way they should be doing that work? Is that the answer they should be writing or writing down? You know what I'm saying? Um, and when they find that it's almost that pressure of me looking at their work and saying that's right or that's wrong, or these are the exact steps you follow, when they start to find that pressure isn't there, and they start taking those risks and learning, it's just joyous. It's just so fun to watch, because I don't always know where the lesson is going. I'm learning from them, especially with the tech things. These kids always are teaching me new things. Um, and there's something to be said about figuring something out together, and whether that's my husband and I figuring out something together, or my students and I figuring out something together, it's so satisfying. And when students kind of have that experience and they start experiencing that, most really truly enjoy it.
Do you have do you have any advice for a teacher who wants to do this and lacks the confidence in the vulnerability that it takes to transition into teaching like this? Where do you find your own confidence in approaching this, or what are small steps that they can take to not only build the student's capability, but more so to build our own confidence and capability in this style of instruction?
I think, Ken, what you said is super important. Uh it's having confidence. It's scary. So it's a scary, I think, transition to make. And I have been teaching for many years, and it's really in the past, I would say I've always tried to do inquiry-based teaching, but it wasn't really inquiry-based when I looked at it. It's to really allow students to be self-directed learners is scary. So my advice would be, one, have confidence in your students, that they will get to the learning that they need to. Like if you have standards that you're teaching, they will learn those standards. They're going to surprise you. All I can say is every day might surprise me in terms of they exceed my expectations in terms of like the takeaways that I want them to gain from a lesson. I would tell teachers, start small. Take a lesson that you've traditionally taught as more of a teacher directed lesson, and just ask yourself the question I ask myself: is there a way I can design this lesson where I give very little information, whether it's small learning stations, whether it's discussion groups, whether it's watching a short YouTube video and talking about it. Just take one or two lessons at it. Don't do it all at once, and try to redesign that lesson so it is more student centered, um, and see how it goes. And I really believe that it will be successful. And as the teacher experiences those successes with the students, it builds your confidence and it makes you want to do that more and more and more. I agree 100%. It's scary at the beginning, and there are lessons that don't go well. And you kind of just have to laugh and reflect and say, what happened there and why didn't it go well and what can I change? But the outcomes and the benefits are so much worth the effort to keep trying that. I believe that. And as the successes come from designing those lessons, as a teacher, your confidence will grow. And you won't want to go back to like the old way of teaching. I believe that. And the students are
I
excited.
believe that. I believe that 100% what you just said at the end. You won't want to go back. And it was such a pivotal way in how I instructed in my class, and the momentum you build just snowballs so fast in your own confidence, your own ability, and what your students are able to accomplish, adjust to, and adapt to as well. you mentioned some lessons don't always go well, which I agree with. I had many lessons blow up in my face, and I think as you're trying new things, I think it's important to be explicit with students and say, this is something I've never tried before. I want to see how well it goes. And I would commonly say to them, do you remember when we did blank, and I would share something that was very outlandish or very different or a fun project. And say, oh yeah, like that was awesome. I said, well, at one point in time, I said to them, I've never done this before. I don't know how it's going to go. And look, now you're still doing it, and it's better than when I did it the first time. And then I'll follow up and say, do you remember when we did this lesson? And I'll reference something else, and they'll all say, no, I don't remember that. I said, yeah, because I did it 3 years ago and it was terrible, and I've never done it again. So we're going to see which category this idea falls into, right? So being explicit with the students, because you do get valuable feedback from them, right? They're more interested in showing up 100%, right? There's times where students just are tired. They're not into it. No matter how exciting you are, no matter how great of a teacher you are, there are days where students are off and there are days where more students are off. So even just saying that, you're capturing their attention to give it their best effort for whatever you're presenting to them in front of them. So for those lessons that don't go well, what is your measure to say that? Like, why do you say that they didn't go well? What was it that happened? What was it about it? Like, what is that measure for you to define a new thing you're trying that you decide, nope, that didn't work, I'm not doing it again?
Well, again, it's hard for me to think of a specific example. I'll think while I'm talking here. But typically, um, I'm laughing because it's typically a lesson as we're going through it where, like, towards you just know it. The kids know it, and I know it. It's like we did not get to a learning goal, or you see the confusion in their face. Um, like, what are we doing here? And I will be trying to, and what I do a lot with my students is I will talk out loud about my thinking of the lesson. Like, when a lesson kind of falls apart, I'll say, okay, here's what I thought might happen or where I could lead you. But obviously it didn't, and what will happen then when you start building that relationship in the classroom, students will often say to me, oh, I get it. They'll say what would have helped them get there. Does that make sense? They will share what I could have done, like the place where I lost them or where they got lost. Sometimes in science, it's just that in investigation, I would hope that a student would develop a question that they need to get to the learning goal. And sometimes the question they come up with is like I didn't give them the foundation, or we didn't get the correct foundation to get them to that question. So it totally goes astray or something. So there are different reasons, there are different designs of the lesson that just sometimes makes it fall apart. But as a teacher, I will know it. The students will know it because typically they'll be very confused about what's going on. And in the best case, when that relationship is built in the classroom, we feel it, we laugh, I'll talk it, they share with me some advice, and we just move on and try it a different way the next day. And that's okay. I think that is perfectly okay.
I think it's the way it should be. You're asking the kids in your classroom their thoughts, their feedback, their advice. Like that's what teaching and learning should look like. We're not there for ourselves. We're there for the students in front of us. And so by establishing and having that relationship, you're able to get that authentic, valuable feedback. And I agree completely. The measure of the student voice is probably the most prolific measure for how successful that lesson was or not, whether or not it's new. Their understanding of the content is another measure, and just also their interest in it, right? And I think that's more so for a long-term project or something that's going to extend multiple lessons. But there were times where I would introduce something and it would be in the context of we're going to work on this for a couple days. Then we might have to transition back to, for lack of a better term, the stuff we're supposed to do. We'll revisit this again. It's something that we're going to kind of mix in over the course of a month. There were times where I would launch it. I'd try to be really excited about it. I was really excited about it. I didn't know if it was really picking up much momentum. We do it for those couple days. A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks passes. I kind of forget to bring it up, or I'm like not super into bringing it up again, and not a single kid mentions it.
Right.
And I was like, okay, none of them were interested in that. And so I just let it fade away, right? Those 2 days, no harm, no foul. Like, we're not going to break our kids because we have a lesson that doesn't go well. We're not going to fall behind on pacing. None of that is going to happen if we're trying to create experiences that are going to benefit our students. Because when those experiences, and you mentioned this earlier, when those experiences land, their knowledge and their understanding of the content and the standards we're supposed to teach is so much deeper because they're coming to those conclusions themselves.
Right. And they're part of the process. You know, they're getting that knowledge, not on their own, but they're finding it kind of on their own, you know, and it's so much more meaningful. It's deeper. I find sometimes when I teach in that method, there's a level of trust that has to be there between the students and self, like where I might set up an experience, a lesson, and I'll tell the students, this might seem confusing for a day or two. Let's stick with it. Trust me, in about 3 days, this is all going to come together and you're going to see, you know, what happened here. But there's just a trust that has to be present, I think, in the classroom between the learners and the teacher. And again, sometimes it doesn't go well, as you said. And like you said, it's not the biggest deal in the world, you know, if you lose a day or two of classroom time. So, right.
Mm-hmm. So I want to move into our exit ticket in 1 minute, which is the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. I want to circle back to the outdoor education just for one final question on that.
Good. I could
Teachers that don't have a forest teachers that don't have a forest available to them, and someone pioneering that program like you are, what advice do you have for teachers to utilize the outdoor space that they have available to them, whether it's expectations to set with students or ways to think about the resources available and how to connect to the standards? What is just some advice you have for them to get started with bringing their kids outside more for instruction?
Take a walk. You know, sometimes just take a walk around your school grounds. I think just the mental health benefits of getting the fresh air, getting the sunlight, getting outdoors, what it brings back to your classroom, the benefits that you get from that are well worth that 10 or 15 minutes of even just taking a walk. I find little things like when students are working and having on my big screen TV a nature scene or one of those ocean scenes, bringing in music. I just think you don't, even if it's not taking your students outdoors, if you bring images of nature in and have students write about it, if you, you know, use stories about growing up and things you did outdoors, there's so many ways to integrate nature into the lessons, even if physically you don't take your students outdoors, that you can bring nature and the awareness of nature to them and integrate it in little ways into your lessons.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. So we're going to jump into our exit ticket. Same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. Question number 1, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
You know what happened? My mind went like this, like, oh my gosh, you have interviewed some of my cohort teachers, and they are such remarkable people that I'm finding myself judging my answers to theirs right now. So
No
I'm
way. No,
going
you,
to
this has been great.
okay, could you ask that question again? So I will focus on what you're saying now instead of what I think I should be answering. Okay.
What is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
Oh my gosh. Provide lessons that help them find their authentic selves. Give them that space to learn about who they are. You know, I think if there's one shift what experience has taught me is, you know, when I was a younger teacher, I just wanted to teach my content. I was so excited about my content. I wanted my students to be excited about that too. And I think now what I try to do is use my content and my excitement and passion for it as a vehicle for students to find out who they are and who they want to be. And it starts with giving them that space in your classroom to be authentic and find their voice.
Well, you're off to a great start. That was a
Okay.
beautiful answer. You're at least in the top 50 of the state teachers
Okay.
of the year.
Hey, I'll take it. I will take it.
What is the best advice you've ever received, whether it be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student?
Um, well, one that I come back to is when I wasn't even student teaching. I was observing in classrooms when I was in college. And I did not like school. I was a good student, but I really hated being in school. So the fact that I'm a teacher is still kind of a head scratcher to me. But I had an aunt who really convinced me I might want to consider being a teacher. But I mentally had this image of being a teacher as kind of this disciplinarian, I think, in front of the classroom. And when I was observing, one of the teachers I was observing just walked up to me, and I think I presented a short little lesson. And he said, Lori, he knew me as a student because it was at the high school that I attended. And he said, Lori, you have to be authentic. Don't try to be something or some person that you aren't. Just go in and teach and be the person that you are. And that just always stuck with me. And I think that's really good advice. You know, be your authentic self when you're with your students.
I think it's fantastic advice, and I think it's so important. There are very loud, abrasive might be the wrong term, but loud, just outgoing personalities that have great classroom management, and then there are very quiet, very calm teachers that have just as great classroom management because they are their authentic selves when they're working with their students. So we know the school year goes in waves. There are days or weeks that we struggle to survive. What is something that every educator needs to hear in those moments of struggle to power up?
I think that the words of advice I would give is this will pass. And just that experience does show you um, your experiences in the classroom come in waves, just like life. I mean, you have your high points, things are going well, and then you have, for whatever reason, and sometimes you don't know why, you struggle. You know, you have a week, a month that you just feel down, that things aren't going well, but it will pass. You know, just keep going in there, doing the best that you can, and not to take it personally as something that you're doing wrong. Um, it will pass. I think that's what I would tell people.
Absolutely.
You know, not to sit
It's
and dwell
easy
on
to
it,
fall
and
into
beat yourself up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What separates the teachers who are the ones constantly seeking to change, innovate, and adopt new teaching strategies?
What separates those teachers? Is that kind of the question? Um, I think that comes with that teaching gene. It's like that desire to be innovative, or I hope it would. I think we have to push the boundaries a little bit. I don't think teachers can always be the rule followers. I think we have to believe that we do know best. We know our students, and sometimes we have to think of ways to teach beyond what we're told that we should, in the way that we should. And I think the best teachers are those that sometimes break the rules, push the boundaries, teach in a way that they weren't taught, but that they truly, their gut tells them that it works. You know, when you do something in your classroom and you sense it works, you just know it does. Keep doing that. You're connecting with the students. So I don't think we can allow ourselves to get lazy, to just keep going with the flow, because students change, times change, and I think we just have to constantly, to energize ourselves, keep looking for those innovative ways to teach and push the boundaries a little bit. Keeps it exciting for us too.
Definitely. It definitely does. So just to close this out here, what are ways that our audience can continue to connect with you, follow along with you, interact with you, whether it be social media, email, websites, anything that you want to share with our audience?
Well, I do have on Facebook, I have a Superior School Forest Facebook page that I post a lot of what we're doing out there. I do have a TikTok account. I know that's a little controversial now, but it's a way to share what the students are doing at the forest in ways that we can use nature to connect with our students and teach them. And really just by email, Lori.Danz@superiork12.wi.us if anybody wants to talk to me.
Excellent. So if you could, when we're done here, send those links to the TikTok, Facebook page, and I have your email, and I'll link up to everything in our show notes page, or just wherever you're watching or listening, you can scroll down and find those to follow along with Lori. So Lori, seriously, thank you so much. I love this conversation. I really found it fascinating. I think there's so much that you're doing that is so beneficial for your district, and they're really fortunate to have you as a part of their team, and creating those experiences for the kids, and also supporting the teachers in creating those experiences for their students as well. So thank you again for joining us, and to our listeners, I hope all is well. We're at that time of year where we're really powering through and looking towards the second half of the year in just a short month or so. And so really think about the time you've spent with your students so far and the experiences you can start to provide them. It's never too late in the year to try new things, try new strategies. If anything, it's easier in the middle of the year because you have that foundation set with your students. So, Laurie, as we power down this episode, you absolutely left us feeling powered up.
Thank you, Ken, and I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for everything you do to support education and teachers.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.